Watching Kyle's unboxing videos again?
Yeah, he always finds the coolest... No way! A robot dog? Gotta ask where he got it.
Or use your Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra. Just draw a circle around the dog on your screen, and it shows you where to buy it right in the app.
Whoa, I just learned a new trick. And that for once, I beat Kyle to the next big thing.
Circle it, find it with the new Galaxy S24 Ultra and circle the search with Google. Get yours now at Samsung.com. Internet connection required. Results may vary based on visuals.
Hello, Duke fans, and welcome to episode 395 of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. It's Sunday, February 27th, 2022. March is right around the corner. I believe that this is the last episode, barring any, breaking news, that we will record in the month of February, which means the next time we talk to you after today, it will be March, our favorite time of the year on this show. I am your host, Sam Klein, back again from another absence. I am sorry again for having missed another show, especially after a victory midweek, but we have a very fun one to talk about today. I am your host for this episode. I am joined, as always, by Donald and Jason. Jason, I will start with you. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Doing really great. It's so relaxing to have a game where you don't have to sweat it at all, ever. Like even I think Syracuse made a couple little runs, but you were never sweating it if you were a Duke fan. That's fun.
There was a point at the end of the first half where Syracuse was on like a 15-point run, basically, which brought the game from like Duke up by triple to Duke up by slightly less than double. So that just tells you the magnitude of the beatdown. Donald Wine is also here. Donald, how are you today?
Oh, I'm doing great. So I was at the DC United season opener last night, which was at the same time as the game. So I watched the game in full this morning, and that was I think I liked that because one, DC United won. Congrats to my team. And then also I got to wake up and experience more goodness with this game. I knew the score, obviously, and I knew how bad we were beating the brakes off of them. But I really enjoyed getting up to watch it in full this morning. What a delightful win. Just absolutely delightful.
Yeah, the vibes from this game were incredibly pleasant. There was, as we said, there was basically it wasn't competitive. Like from the tip, Duke went out to, I think it was an 11-0 lead and 14 nothing lead.
Yeah.
And Syracuse basically never came close again. I should also announce before we get into our normal programming, I'm sorry if my mouth is a little garbled this morning. I'm just about to finish my half of a very large chocolate chip cookie from Levain Bakery. Are either of you familiar with Levain Bakery?
I have heard of it. Yes.
I have never heard of it, but
I'm not surprised that those were the answers I got. It is originally from New York City. I believe they now have one in Washington. There's a bunch in New York. I believe they now have one in Washington and one recently opened in Boston. If you find yourself in any of those places and can get yourself to a Levain Bakery and can stomach the idea of spending $5 on a single cookie, these things will change your life. It's just it's different. You can't eat the whole thing. It would like make you explode because they're too rich and too incredible.
Oh, I will rise to that challenge. I can eat anything, even when people think it is way too much to eat. For example, this morning I had for breakfast. I went out to. I'm on the board of directors of the Atlanta Men's Synagogue Softball League, and our softball league.
Of course, Jason. First of all, of course you are.
I know. So we went out to have our board meeting that we have at this deli, Goldberg's Deli, and I ordered potato latkes, challah French toast, and an everything bagel. And people were like, "You're not going to eat all that." And I was like, "Oh yes, Goldberg's makes really good bagels and really good latkes." And I was like, "Oh yes, I'm eating all of this."
I think I had the most traditional breakfast of the three of us. I had pizza, which I just ate.
Wait, was it cold? Cold pizza?
No, it was not. I heated up in the oven.
The thing about pizza for breakfast is you can eat it cold or warm, and it's
correct.
It's completely acceptable, right?
I'm a warm pizza kind of guy. I warmed it up and finished it maybe 10 minutes before we jumped on and started recording this. So let's talk about the game, because I know a lot of people were eating last night at the Carrier Dome.
Right. So we have to do, as is tradition, we need to do headlines. And I know that we got a few of them from listeners. We also got a few emails from listeners who were at the game yesterday, which was pretty cool. But I did want to give a couple headlines that we had gotten. On the topic of going to the game, by the way, I very briefly yesterday entertained the idea of driving to Syracuse for this game. But then I realized, I was like, oh, I can make it, right? It's not like impossible. And then I realized I was going to have to spend 10 hours in the car by myself. And I just was not physically ready for that and had not decided ahead of time. So I missed a fun one, which is a shame. But a couple of headlines that came in. So from listener Ronald, we had DBD3s bring Glee and Orange Aid, which was hard to read.
I was going to say that one was a mouthful.
Tough to read out loud, but fun. And Jared Strauss gave us Marmalade, Duke Jams on Orange.
And by the way, Jared, shout out to Jared, because he pointed out in his email, he said, Jason will really enjoy the shot chart from this game. And he pointed out that every shot was from the three or the paint. People, if you have not gone on ESPN and looked at the shot chart from this game, it is a work of art. It is a thing of beauty. It should be framed and hung in a museum. Jared is 100% right. Every single shot is either beyond the 3-point line or in the lane, except for one. Mark Williams took a little jump hook from the baseline that's just outside the lane, probably about an 8 or 10 foot jump hook. It was very late in the shot clock. I remember the shot when he took it, and I was like, that's not going in. It didn't go in. But that is like literally the only mid-range shot that Duke took this entire game. Oh, magnificent.
Listener Paula also had a sliced, diced, and pureed for this game, which I appreciated. Donald, I will let you go first on your headline now that we've gotten the listener headlines out of the way. What did you have for this one?
So mine is Duke beats the blood orange pulp out of Syracuse. Going with that theme.
Very good. Jason, what do you got?
I have it's raining threes as Duke again crushes the Orange.
I had Duke gets carried away in route of Syracuse.
Oh, Sam wins. Sam wins. So, that's good, man.
Everyone, the nice, when you play Syracuse and you beat the crap out of them, there are just too many ways that you can pun this one to death, which is awesome. So, all right. Duke beats Syracuse 97-72 in the Carrier Dome. It's a 25-point victory that arguably felt bigger. Could it possibly have felt bigger than the final score indicated?
It's like the last time we played them. We won by 20 something. You're like, wow, it felt like it was 40.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll let you guys start with the good, but before I get there, just a couple of statistical highlights from this game. Mark Williams goes for 28 and 12. He scored 28 points in this game. Paolo Banchero goes for a very pedestrian 21 and 9, and AJ Griffin had 20 points, including 6 made 3-pointers, which was one off of the Duke freshman record. They mentioned this on the broadcast that Cam Reddish has the freshman record for threes made in a game with 7. So AJ was very close to that, and he only went 6 for 10. So he really needs to step it up if he wants to break Cam Reddish's record. He only has a few games left for that. Duke also, or Mike Krzyzewski, is now, I believe, 5 wins away from breaking the 1,200 win barrier, so getting much closer to that. Duke is also now extremely close to clinching outright ACC regular season title victory. All right, that is all the background here. Jason, you're going to go first. I want your good from the Syracuse game, and something tells me we're going to spend a lot more time in this section than we do in the bad.
Yeah, a few weeks ago, I think we got to the bad and I played crickets. I could play crickets, I think, for the bad again in this game. But in terms of the good, I'm going to go with Mark Williams. And Mark is now the only player in the country, the only college basketball player. Think about how many players are playing college basketball. There is only one of them shooting 70% from the field and 70% from the free throw line. In fact, during the month of February, my friend Eric Rothschild messaged this to me. During the month of February, Mark is shooting 80% from the field and 80% from the free throw line. That's absurd. That's ridiculous. And the reason is usually the guys who shoot really high from the field, obviously, are guys who play next to the basket, who take a lot of dunks and layups and stuff, which is Mark's game. Hey, love it. Great. And hit them at a high percentage because you got to. But usually those guys are not good enough shooters to be able to hit 70 or 80% is absurd of their free throws. Man, Mark just has touch. Doesn't matter where he is on the floor. And he was, like you said, 28 and 12 with 3 block shots. By the way, against a team that doesn't come inside, like Syracuse doesn't attack the basket. Their game is all about they're taking threes, they're taking pull up, off the dribble jumpers and stuff like that with the Boeheim brothers and Cole Swider and the such. They do not attack the basket. I don't know how Mark got 3 block shots, but he did. He absolutely owns the paint. He is at this point. You have to start, really wondering: is there a better center in college basketball than Mark? I mean, there probably is. Alec Kessler at Auburn. There are 1 or 2 other guys who are maybe in the mix. Drew Timme, I guess, at Gonzaga. Mark's among the 3 to 5, clearly among the 3 to 5 best post players, best big men in all of college basketball at this point. And he has done it by progressing month after month. Look at his monthly statistics, like what he's averaging points, rebounds, block shots, and such earlier in the season and where he is today. His game just continues to grow and evolve, and he's dominant, absolutely dominant.
What was impressive to me, Jason, on offense for Mark Williams is how poised he remained behind the zone, where he was basically camping out like on the baseline or just off the baseline, waiting for the ball to come into him either from the elbow or from the outside.
From Paulo
or from Wendell Moore, who was in there a little bit. And he just remained completely in control in that position, which I'm sure feels a little bit uncomfortable because normally he's not playing that close. He's not waiting around that close to the basket, and especially not with another guy draped over him, which is usually what it's like when you play in the 2-3 zone, because someone is effectively playing right under the basket like that. So he's usually got a man, if not 2 men on him, and just handled that really well.
Before Donald jumps in on Mark, I do want to mention, we said in the preview, Sam, you weren't here. Donald and I talked about this.
I listened to the preview, though. I listened to the whole show.
So you know what I'm going to bring up.
Great program. Folks, if you didn't listen to the last show, great episode.
Like and subscribe.
I think I'm on 1.3 or 1.2 speed for this show that I don't normally I download, but I don't normally necessarily listen to it because I already heard it. But in any event,
I was going to mention Syracuse had lost their center, James Edwards, earlier in the season. And I said that it was going to really impact their ability to control the inside. And that bore out in a very big way with Mark Williams just repeatedly getting slam dunks, easy post moves. They could not contest him at all.
I think when it comes to Mark, like we've talked about his efficiency, Jason, we've joked that he's our best mid-range shooter. Because he is, and the fact that he's been able to just be just an absolute demon inside. I mean, he knew that there was a weakness and he exploited it. I did want to go back, Sam, to the fact that you mentioned that we had 3 guys over 20 points. That's the first time that's happened since that Kentucky game back in November 2018 when RJ, Cam, and Zion all went for 20 plus points. So that
can I wait really quick? Can I ask how often do you guys rewatch that game?
The highlights, it's like a regular, like once a month thing.
Yeah. I mean, the highlights on YouTube or something like that, or on Twitter, the highlights from that game get posted on Twitter, on my Twitter feed, like once a week. And I think I don't skip them ever.
Yeah. And I want to say for this game, what the parallel between that game and this one is the fun that this team was having. Like you could hear on the broadcast, like some of the mics were picking up just how they were celebrating every shot, every dunk, every and one. Like this team was having a ton of fun out there. And of course you have a game where you're shooting like that, you're going to have a lot of fun with it. But there was, the gym, they talked about, first of all, I will say shout out to the Syracuse crowd for showing up. There's 33,000 people there last night. They set a record for the number of students to ever witness a game. They had 8,800 students. Keep in mind that Duke's undergrad population is 6,600 students. So we could fit all of Duke into Cameron, and they still wouldn't have eclipsed what they brought last night. So hats off to them, but hats off to us for taking them out of the game from the opening tip. Like they had a lot of fun with it, and really it became where they were just kind of talking about our players and what they're going to do in the draft next year. Like that's how delightful this game was. These guys were having a lot of fun. The three of those guys, AJ Griffin, Paulo Banchero, and Mark Williams, especially, were just kind of having fun playing off of each other. They were finding each other on the wings for shots. They were finding each other in the paint. Paulo had 9 assists, and I feel like half of them were wraparound assists to Mark Williams for a dunk or a lay-in for an and one. So I love this type of basketball, and I love that they saw the plan. They knew what they had to do to duplicate it from last time, and they just went out and redid it.
Jason, one of the topics that we have been harping on recently, the Duke, is a source for improvement, is Paulo Banchero's performance, and I think that is at both ends of the court, where we know what he's capable of. We know how he prepares. And we've said in recent weeks about how one of the things that is keeping Duke from its ceiling is Paulo's play. What did you see yesterday from Paulo Banchero that might indicate that he's about to hit that next gear?
Well, so the important thing to note is that playing against a zone, especially the Syracuse zone, is not like playing against a man-to-man, which is what has bothered Paulo lately. And I really think this is, I don't want to read too much into this one game versus what has been a month of struggles for Paulo Banchero. He usually is having trouble with double teams, with teams who are playing him man-to-man. And then when he gets the ball, they have another guy, usually another big, run at him to double team him. And that's not the way Syracuse plays. So this wasn't necessarily him correcting what has been wrong with Duke's offense lately. So I want to start by saying that. That said, I mean, a great game for him. And I want to start with the 3-pointers. Paulo has really struggled on threes in recent weeks. He's just been 3 for his past 20 on 3-pointers. He was 4 of 7 in this game. And by the way, all 4 of the ones he hit were from the corner. He was 4 of 4 on 3-pointers taken in the corner. He missed the one.
And he was set. And he was set. A lot of times you see him like to dribble up to the 3-point line and take a shot. Those were ones where, because we were moving the ball around, he worked his way into the corner and was set. All he had to do was pop and swap. And I love that he was able to maximize that last night.
Yeah. And it is worth noting that where Paulo's been struggling lately has been those threes from the top of the circle and from the, sort of elbow extended. And this time we got him down in that corner, and it seemed to really, really work for him. Look, you guys already talked about a little bit about the assists. 9 assists is a ridiculous, huge number for a guy like him. We played through him all game long, and he was able to find mostly Mark Williams for assists. By the way, crazy stat line from him: 9 assists. He takes 7 threes, and he only gets 1 rebound. Was Paulo playing point guard? I mean,
it was very bizarre. Other than AJ Griffin turning into the volume 3-point shooter, everything about yesterday's game was somewhat bizarre in terms of output. Yeah,
but so the last thing I wanted to say about Paulo was, in the post-game news conference, Coach K said that Paulo's been thinking too much, and I feel like I feel like you can see that on the floor. That when the ball comes to him, he tries to analyze what the situation is once he gets the ball. And Coach K said they've been telling him, analyze it first, play faster. Don't analyze once you get the ball. Once you get the ball, you need to attack. You need to do something. And that has absolutely been the case with Paulo lately. And Coach K added that John Shire has been spending a tremendous amount of time working one-on-one with Paulo about speeding up his game, about figuring out what he wants to do before he gets the ball, and then doing it once he has the ball. I don't know if it's working yet, because again, it's Syracuse, and it's different than any other defense you're going to play against. But boy, you had to like the results that we saw last night.
And honestly, Jason, when you talk about the fact that he was overthinking things, I don't blame him for that. Because if you think about, the great players in this game right now, they always talk about how those players think 2-3 moves ahead, and they're always looking down the court, or they're always looking for this, and they're always analyzing that. And it's almost expected for the great players to have this brain that's just going to just be an algorithm that computes everything in the span of 0.3 nanoseconds, and they're able to make the correct play every single time. He's learning that that's not always going to be the case. And he's learning that sometimes you can overthink on the basketball court, and that limits the fun that you're having, which is why I think him having fun last night, shooting those corner threes, doing some, magic style passes inside the paint to Mark Williams, those sort of things where he's having fun with it. It reduces the thinking part of the game and gets more back into the fun element of when you're shooting well and you're playing well and your team's playing well and you're having fun out there. You're being a better basketball player for yourself and for your teammates.
On the topic of big men, I suppose, but this sort of applies to the whole team. One of the things that we've harped on that Duke has gotten better at, I think, recently, and which really showed out yesterday and was a key part of them just taking the game away early, was the offensive rebounding. Duke actually pulled down more offensive rebounds than Syracuse had defensive rebounds yesterday, which that alone
that's absurd.
That's domination, sort of no matter how you slice it. If you're getting more of the rebounds off of your own offensive glass than the opponent is, you are very likely winning the game and winning by a lot. And Duke was doing that a ton yesterday, getting second chance points. Mark Williams being one of the key beneficiaries of that, but also Duke being able to kick it out for more threes was essential here. And Syracuse's zone, by the way, prioritizes getting defensive rebounds. Like that's one of the hallmarks of playing a good zone, is that if nothing else, you sort of force guys to take shots farther away from the basket, and then whatever happens, you're going to get the ball because you have multiple guys who are already close to the basket when the ball goes up. So that's just another great indicator for Duke. I know we talked about how Syracuse is not really where we would expect them to be at this point in the season. They have injuries that are especially hurting them on the front line, but a great indicator for Duke that they're able to comfortably out rebound this team.
Mark Williams had 8 offensive rebounds last night. I think he only had 4 defensive rebounds last night. But on those 8 offensive rebounds, I feel like 5 or 6 of them, he was able to just take the ball and go right back up and get a layup or get a dunk. So that's the aggression that we thought that Mark Williams was going to have this entire season. He's starting to show that more and more now. And also he's showing confidence because, like we've talked about, he knew that he was the biggest guy on the floor. He knew that no one could touch him. So he just said, okay, I'm just going to go and get these boards. And once I get the ball in my hands, nobody can stop me. That's the type of dominance that we were expecting from Mark Williams the whole season. And we've seen, especially over the month of February.
So speaking of those offensive rebounds, like Sam said, Duke had more offensive rebounds than Syracuse had defensive rebounds. Our offensive rebound rate was 53%, which is outrageous. But as a result of that, there would be long stretches of the game where Duke would just score on every single possession. We had one stretch where we scored on 10 out of 11 possessions. I mean, that's incredibly demoralizing if you are a defense, if you're trying to catch up. We were already ahead. It was from the 18-minute mark to the 11-minute mark of the first half. We were already ahead, and then we scored on 10 out of 11 possessions. And at that point, Syracuse is just dead in the water. They've got no chance. There are a couple other stats I want to point out really quickly. One is Duke only had 6 turnovers in this game. That's a great number. Now, again, the Syracuse zone is not about turning you over, but still to be able to hold on to the ball, not commit any mistakes is a big deal. And then Donald, I'm stealing it from you probably. Donald's favorite statistic, assist rate. How many assists do you have for how many field goals you made? Outrageous last game for Duke. They had 26 assists on 35 made field goals against Syracuse. 26 out of 35. That's an assist rate of 74.3%. And think about the fact that, like you guys mentioned, we had some offensive rebounds that turned into putbacks. So, I mean, basically every time we were in sort of a offensive set and we passed the ball to a guy and he shot it, we got an assist like virtually every one of those baskets. It was just great ball movement.
Can I talk about the best mistake of the night? The best mistake of the night was Wendell Moore on that fast break where he was trying to get the ball to Trevor Keels.
Oh, that was so funny.
So instead, he decided to just yam on the entire Carrier Dome.
I was going to say that Wendell Moore only had 1 2-point basket made on the night, but man, did he make it count. I think, Donald, you mentioned Mark Williams dunks earlier, but the best dunk of the night has to come from Wendell Moore. I mean, that was
absolutely,
it was ferocious.
And by the way, the thing about Wendell's game, he didn't get a 10, 5, and 5 because he didn't score enough points, which is kind of, he had 6 rebounds, 6 assists, but he didn't get enough points to get to a 10, 5, and 5. But I thought Wendell had a great game. I loved his defense. If you watch the defense he was playing on Buddy Boeheim. Now, Buddy got hot for a little while, but Buddy was outstanding in this game. But all the shots he was hitting were really difficult. They were he was stepping to the side. He was doing step back jumpers and stuff. Hardest shot to take in basketball. Wendell did not give him an easy shot the entire game. And the two of them were matched up every single time. And there's a great race going on right now in the ACC for ACC Defensive Player of the Year. And it's a 3-man race. It's between Mark Williams, Wendell Moore, and Reese Beekman of Virginia. And Reese is a great defender. I'm a little bit afraid that people who love Duke will split their votes between Wendell Moore and Mark Williams, and that Reese Beekman will slip in there, because I think the two best defenders in the best perimeter defender in the ACC, the best one-on-one defender is Wendell Moore, and the best post defender, the best rim protector is Mark Williams. That is a wonderful luxury to have on your team.
I just want to comment really quickly. This is not necessarily having to do with either Duke or Syracuse, but Dave O'Brien and Corey Alexander were on the call last night for ESPN, and I really loved their commentary on the game. I thought it was, Corey Alexander, I told my best friend this morning, he's fastly becoming, in my mind, one of the best color commentators that they have at ESPN. He had a great insight on the game. He was able, the fact that he played obviously lends himself to be able to see things on the court, but he knows the ACC very well. And Jason, that Defensive Player of the Year race that you were talking about, he mentioned that in depth, and he also talked about some of the qualities that these guys have in each of their facets of how they're doing on defense. I thought he did that very well. So I just wanted to shout them out, because I thought not only was this a delightful game to watch, it was a delightful game to listen to, because I thought they did a great job at calling the game.
All right, guys, let's spend a few minutes in case there is anything to talk about the bad. So I'll let you gather your thoughts for a second. Donald, what do you have at all from the bad in this game?
For me, it's just the run that Syracuse had at the end of the first half and extended into the second half. They went on a 13-0 run, basically at the under 4 timeout leading into the first basket of the second half. And we've seen these, runs before. Obviously, we've seen these.
Donald, by the way, they had a run in the second half as well, where like every time Duke would get up 30, Syracuse would go, "Oh no," and they get it back to like 15 or 18, and then Duke would take it back out. But yeah, no, you're right.
I think it's one of those things where, of course, we want to limit those as much as possible, because that has beaten us in games before. We've had, huge leads and given it away. Obviously, this game was a little more delightful in the sense that before the under 4 timeout or under 16 timeout in the first half, this game was over. But you want to limit those opportunities for teams to get momentum, especially on the road, and get back in the game.
Jason, what did you have from the bad here? If your only thing was that Duke gave up a couple of runs, I'll take it.
No, I got a couple other things I want to mention just very quickly. It's nothing serious. But Joey Baker only plays 5 minutes in this game, and a couple of those were, some time at mop-up time, with the end of the bench. And it's a little surprising to me, I guess, that Joey didn't get more playing time, because Syracuse is ideally suited for his outside shooting. And folks will recall he scored 11 against Syracuse last time we played them. He had a pretty good game, not his best game of the year, but probably certainly one of his 5 best games of the year was against Syracuse last time. He had that great game against Florida State a few days ago where he was bombing away and he had 4 3-pointers, but for the most part, Joey Baker's just not getting meaningful minutes for this team. He gets like 2 or 3 minutes in the first half, and then he plays at the end of the game, if it's a blowout. And it's not so much that it's terrible for the team. I think a lot of why he's not getting minutes is that it's just hard to find time with AJ Griffin playing this well and Wendell Moore. And, the guys who are ahead of Joey Baker are playing too well for us to find minutes for him. But it's kind of a pity, I think, for his senior year, what is almost certainly going to be his last year at Duke, even though he could have another year someplace. But for Joey to be having a season where he isn't getting to play a larger role, I feel bad for him about that. And again, I thought that Syracuse would be another opportunity for him to play a bit. And then the other guy I wanted to mention was Trevor Keels, who it seemed like he had a really passive kind of game. He did not shoot much at all, didn't hunt his shot very much. I'm not sure that's a bad thing, by the way, because Syracuse is the kind of team, Trevor Keels usually scores by putting his head down and going hard against his man into the lane. And you can't do that against the Syracuse zone. It's just not there. It's not available. So I guess maybe Trevor Keels not shooting a lot was him recognizing what the defense would not give him and what the defense was giving other guys. So that's a good thing. But on the other hand, it wasn't a very big game for Trevor Keels by any stretch. And I also noticed a little bit, it feels to me like Jeremy Roach took a little more of the ball handling duties in this game, more than he has lately from Trevor Keels. Usually we see Wendell Moore and Trevor Keels ahead of Roach, sort of in the ball handling rotation, so to speak. And it felt like Roach has been playing better lately. But look, Jeremy Roach won the game against Virginia. We all said that. No question about it. I expect that when we do Player of the Week at the end of this podcast, it's possible Jeremy Roach's name will come up. It would not be a surprise given how well he played against Virginia. But I think it's a development and something interesting to look at, that I felt like when Roach and Keels were in the game together, that Roach was playing a little more on the ball and Keels a little more off the ball, which is a reverse of what we'd seen in recent weeks.
I think when it comes to Joey Baker, I think he's just saving it for senior night. That's just, I'm just going to believe that.
Amen, brother. And we will be there, you and me.
Extremely jealous of that. I did want to close the discussion on the Syracuse game with one email that we got from listener Steven, who mentioned that, I guess this could have gone in the good rather than at the end of the bad section here. But Steven said that he was at the game last night and was sitting near the Duke bench and got to talk to Nina King and Mickey Krzyzewski for a little bit, and said that was extremely cool, and that it was truly amazing to hear Coach K give a timeout speech. I imagine in this game, not as much profanity as Coach K is probably capable of in a timeout speech, given that none of the timeouts were particularly stressful in this game. So appreciate that from listener Steven. All right, guys, we are going to wrap our discussion of the Syracuse game here. We need to take a quick break. When we get back, we need to preview Duke's last new ACC opponent. That is the Pittsburgh Panthers, led, of course, by Jeff Capel. Duke is playing them this week. And then after that, we need to do a quick look at the rest of the ACC and the situation of college basketball around the country. So stick around. So as we mentioned, Duke gets its first crack at the Pittsburgh Panthers on Tuesday night. That game is going to be at the Oakland Zoo at the Pete, Pittsburgh's famous home arena, where normally you would say it's a dangerous place to play. Pitt's got a great home crowd, and the students really show up for them. Not sure if that's going to be the case in this game. Pittsburgh is not having a great season. They are 11-18 overall in the year. It's just 6-12 in the ACC. Our dear Jeff Capel might be in a bit of trouble if not for his contract situation at Pitt. So let's talk a little bit about the performance of the Panthers so far this season in a game that I assume you guys are going to agree with me Duke should be winning going away, similar to how they played at Syracuse. But Donald, let's go to you first. Tell me about Pittsburgh's recent performance in the ACC.
It's not been good. I'll say their only key win that they have this year is against UNC. And that was probably the shock of the ACC so far this season, as far as upsets when it comes to the conference play. But they have some bad losses this year. The Citadel, UMBC, Monmouth, Georgia Tech, and Boston College, all of them. And a lot of these games have not been good as far as just how they play. The one thing about Pitt that I think Duke has to remember is that Pitt gives up a lot of assists. It's kind of similar to Syracuse, the game we just played, where they almost allow for teams to pass the ball around and score on them. They're one of the worst teams at allowing assists on made baskets. So I want to see Duke really take note of moving the ball around. They're also going to want to eliminate possessions, because Pitt slows the game down quite a bit, usually to try to get an advantage over the other team, similar to Virginia, but they're not playing a pack line defense like Virginia is, and they just haven't been playing sound basketball lately. So Pitt is in for it, but I do think this. I know you mentioned that the Oakland Zoo is probably not going to be as raucous as it has been before. This is traditionally a place that we have not played very well since Pitt joined the ACC. So we can't look over the Pitt Panthers. Obviously, Jeff Capel is going to want to get a win against Coach K in his final time coaching against him. he's going to want to get this victory. And that is a statement win for Pitt, not necessarily for the NCAA tournament, but just to kind of say that, hey, we are improving on this season and we're showing some moxie at the end of the season. But this is something that Duke needs to win. They need to go out, take the crowd out of it, and let's get out of here. I will say I will be at this game on press row. So if people are going to the game, hopefully I will see you there.
I don't think Pitt has much of a chance of winning this game. Pomeroy gives them a 10% chance, says Duke is a 90% to win this game. I actually think it should be higher than that because Pitt's playing out the string. They're not making the NCAA tournament. They're not making the NIT tournament. And Duke is playing for really important stuff. We'll talk a little bit later about, the ACC race and the race for NCAA seeding and things like that. Duke is putting itself in a good position for those things. We cannot let a team like Pitt, arguably the worst team in the ACC, spill that momentum for us. I'll give you the advanced stats on Pitt really quickly. 138th best on defense, according to Ken Pomeroy, 229th on offense. That is really bad. So they're a decent, not good, but they're a decent defensive team. They're a horrible offensive team. Like Donald mentioned, they are very, very slow. They're one of the 20 slowest teams in the country on offensive possessions. They move the ball around a lot, and then they turn it over. That's basically what Pitt does. They are 333rd in turnover percentage. 21.5% of their possessions in a turnover. 1 out of every 5 times Pitt has the ball, they turn it over. That's awful. It is really bad. When they don't turn it over, they're not very good at shooting it. They're 305th in the country at 2-point field goal percentage. They only hit 32% of their 3-point field goals. The only thing that they do well on offense is they get to the free throw line. They're actually 3rd in the nation at free throws compared to field goals, number of free throws shot versus number of field goals shot. Now, part of that is because they turn the ball over so much, they don't get lots of field goals, but they do a good job of getting to the free throw line. That is literally the only thing that this Pitt team does well on offense. On defense, they're okay. They're an okay defensive rebounding team. They're a fairly good shot blocking team. You got to be a little careful taking the ball to the rim against them because they've got some length and they'll block some shots. But they give up a lot of 3-pointers, and they don't do a good job defending the 3-point line. The last thing I'll say about them is they are big. Duke is used to, especially Duke's wings, guys like Trevor Keels, Wendell Moore, AJ Griffin. They're used to playing against guys who are smaller than them. That will not be the case against Pittsburgh. Ken Pomeroy says that Pitt is one of the 30 biggest teams in the country, and that's mostly because they have a ton of guys between like 6'4" and 6'7" playing for them. And it could present a problem for Jeremy Roach. Jeremy Roach usually is matched up against, a guy like him who's 6'0", 6'1", maybe. Pitt plays bigger players at the guard positions, and they've got some size in the front line. So that's one thing about the only thing that Pitt has going for them is that they're one of the few teams in the country that can somewhat match Duke on a size standpoint.
Yeah, a couple guys that kind of stand out to me for Pitt, and if you're trying to find reasons why they might have a shot this week against Duke. One of their most interesting players is a guy who was not available to them for most of the season. That's ETL Horton, who is probably Pitt's best shooter. Didn't have a great shooting game most recently in their loss to Miami, but overall is pretty good shooter from deep. And is a guy that Duke needs to lock in on. To Jason's point about bigger guys, he's only 6'3", but he's 200 pounds. So you gotta move him off the 3-point line. The other guy that stands out to me is Femi Odekale, who is a 6'5" sophomore. Another guy who's a pretty good scorer, but he's also a decent distributor and can be a menace on the defensive end. So when it comes to Duke attacking Pittsburgh, Jason, you mentioned that their size. They've got size in the interior as well as on the perimeter. And again, I'm in agreement with you. Pitt's talent and their cohesion this year is not something that should present a big challenge to Duke. But we have seen Duke get momentarily overwhelmed because they're so excited about a Carolina game. That was the after the Carolina game, the first time they lost to UVA at home. So bring the momentum from this road game at Syracuse into the road game at Pittsburgh. Don't look ahead to the Carolina game yet. Don't look ahead to all the hype for all the people who are going to be in the building, because we are going to hear, I mean, you heard a ton of it on the broadcast yesterday against Syracuse, partially because the game was such a blowout. You had to talk about something, but there are going to be a ton of people in attendance for that Carolina game. Everybody's excited for it, but we can't look ahead to that. Duke has an opportunity against Pittsburgh to at least clinch a share of the ACC regular season title.
And the number one seed, they would, because they have the tiebreaker over Notre Dame. If Duke beats Pitt, Duke is the number one seed in the ACC tournament.
And then Duke can clinch, depending on what happens with Notre Dame this week, Duke can then clinch the outright ACC regular season title against UNC. But heads down, stay focused, because the other thing, and we will get to this in a second, is the broader discussion around what's going on in the rest of the country in college basketball. As we mentioned last week, when the NCAA men's basketball committee put out their initial top 16 seeds, and we noted that Duke was number 8 overall, we said that they don't have a ton of opportunities probably to improve, but there are places where Duke can stumble here. And so losing to Pittsburgh, or even having an okay game against Pittsburgh, Duke does not want to have any reason for the committee to doubt their ability to hang with everyone this season. So let's hope that Duke is able to put away Pittsburgh similarly to the way that they were able to put away Syracuse this week. So speaking of the situation around the country, if you were not named Duke and you were in the top 10 going into this weekend, it is almost certain that you lost your game. The headliner late last night, if you stayed up for it, is that Gonzaga went on the road to St. Mary's, who is a very good program. They're ranked. They're like low in the 20s. Certainly making the NCAA tournament has always been a thorn in Gonzaga's side, but St. Mary's takes out the Zags 67-57. Arizona lost yesterday at University of Colorado. It was very cool to see them storming the court there in Boulder. Auburn went on the road to Tennessee, which was an incredible environment. And of course, there's all the Bruce Pearl returning to Tennessee stuff, as he has to do every year. Auburn loses to Tennessee in a really exciting game. Not sure if either of you guys got to catch that one, but it was a fun one in Knoxville yesterday. Purdue gets taken out by Michigan State. Kansas loses to Baylor. Again, not like it's the most crushing loss. Baylor is very strong this season, and I believe was even ranked ahead of Kansas or right next to Kansas in the NCAA's initial bracket reveal. Kentucky loses to Arkansas. Again, not the worst loss. Arkansas is also very good. And
all
Texas
these games
Tech,
are road games. These are all road games.
All
Everybody
road
lost
games.
on the road
Tech,
except Duke.
And Texas Tech loses on the road to TCU. Maybe this is between that and Arizona losing to CU. These are like the worst losses of the weekend. None of these are backbreakers, but top 10 teams just taking an enormous beating yesterday around the country. So Donald, as we look ahead to NCAA tournament seeding and sort of think about the implications here, what does this mean to you?
Yeah, so I saw this article on 538, I guess the other day, and they had a couple of stats that I thought were interesting, and they were kind of talking about how the country has really taken a bath on the ACC this season and really, poo-pooed it, considering, there's just how teams have been playing. And so he mentioned some stats about the ACC, and I think people need to have a nice reminder of how strong the ACC has been over the past 15 years. Since 2007, the ACC has won 138 NCAA tournament games. That's the most of any conference. They have 5 national champions, most of any conference. And they boast the highest tournament win percentage of 61.6% of all games played, they win. So the issue is this. One of the things that they've been looking at is just how teams are ranked, right? And how they're looking at the ACC, and that basically since the start of the poll, the ACC has only had one team, and that's Duke, that's been in the top 25 for most of the season. There's a legitimate possibility that this will be the first time in 55 years that there's not one conference game that has 2 ranked teams in it. That's kind of bizarre for the ACC. 55 years, not one game has featured 2 ranked teams, because of course the only ranked team this entire season has been Duke. But I will say this about Duke, And I know people are kind of using what happened yesterday as kind of a way to say that, hey, maybe Duke still has an outside shot at the number 1 seed. This is this key stat right here. No ACC team has ever won the regular season and the conference tournament and failed to secure a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. So Duke basically is controlling its own destiny with regards to getting a number 1 seed. If they can win out and they can win the ACC tournament, they almost are going to be a lock, despite the fact that the ACC has been a down conference and people have been kind of poo-pooing it away for the last, 3 months. They can still have the best team in the conference secure a number 1 seed. Now, I know there's a lot of work to do, but I think that in light of what happened yesterday, there really is no team in the country that can't be beat. Everyone is beatable. There's no one team that's just a rock star above everybody else. And that's where I think Duke can slide in. But I also think it does take a rising tide to lift some of these ships. Duke is going to have to make sure that's not necessarily let some of these teams win, but ACC teams have to show out this last week to show the tournament committee that, yes, we can beat teams that are better than us. Because as of right now, the only team that will be probably favored in an NCAA tournament game will be the Duke Blue Devils.
We got an email on this topic, Donald, and I wanted to pull this into the discussion because I think you were alluding to all this from listener Brian. He said he wanted to get our thoughts on NCAA projections. He says, I'm not one that gets overly caught up in bracketology because ultimately you have to prove it on the court. I will say that I am slightly annoyed by Lunardi this year. Yes, we realize the ACC is having a historically bad season, but I don't think it's as bad as the metrics and national media are suggesting. I think Miami, Notre Dame, UNC, and Wake could all win a game or two in the NCAAs, even as low seeds. Duke has wins over Gonzaga and Kentucky. 4 losses are combined total of 9 points and has won 11 of their last 12. How are we barely holding on as a 2 seed? It used to be that the final 10 games were one of the selection committee's criteria, but I haven't heard that discussion. Is that still a measure? I know the net is low, but I think that's one of the several metrics the committee uses. Anyway, hope you could provide some more clarity on that. So Jason, I believe that Brian's thinking is maybe outdated from where we are today in terms of the committee, because as Donald was talking about, it's like the ACC is probably as bad as, like, overall is as bad as the national commentators are talking about. And the difference, I think what the listener is referring to is that, look, the ACC has a handful of teams that may be able to win first round games, but those teams are going to be 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 seeds. They're not going to be 3, 4, 5, 6 seeds, right?
Yeah, no, there's no one in the ACC other than Duke that is going to be higher than maybe there's an outside chance someone like a Notre Dame or Wake Forest or North Carolina might get to like an 8.
Like, but if they make a run to the ACC tournament final and beat Duke along the way.
Beat Duke. Yeah, they would have to beat Duke. They'd have to beat Duke and look really impressive doing it for any of these teams to get to, I think, even to an 8 seed. I think they're all looking at being like 9, 10, 11 seeds. First of all, one thing that he mentioned, the NCAA no longer considers your final 10 games. They consider your complete body of work. It's been that way for, I think, like at least 3 or 4 years now. And that's fine.
Basically, since they instituted the net, when they converted to the net from the RPI.
Right. And that makes a lot of sense. And I'm perfectly fine with that. I want to push back a tiny bit on Donald, you saying if Duke wins out, Duke's going to be a number 1 seed. I agree with you. I think that's very, very likely. But I don't think Duke's in complete control of their destiny, because I believe there are still teams ahead of them. I believe that the teams ahead of Duke, other than Gonzaga, and I think Gonzaga's going to win their tournament. Gonzaga's regular season is over. They're going to win their tournament in all likelihood and get a number 1 seed. The other teams that are sort of in contention for that number 1 seed are going to have more impressive games than Duke down the stretch. You know, if you're Arizona, if you're Kentucky, if you're Baylor or Kansas, if you're Auburn, if you're Purdue, you're going to be playing quad 1, really good, impressive teams, ranked teams. Donald, you pointed out ACC has no rank. You'll be playing ranked teams both in your final regular season game and in your postseason tournament. And Duke's not going to have any of that. So I think we need a couple of these teams to lose a game for Duke to get a chance to get a number one seed. We can't vault over them by winning games. We vault over them when we win and they lose. That said, a lot of them play each other. Kentucky and Auburn can't both win the SEC tournament. Kansas and Baylor can't both win the Big 12 tournament. So one of them is going to lose, and I think we probably only need a couple of them to lose for Duke to get there. It's not a sure thing, but it's close. And the bottom line is Duke has to take care of business.
Jason, though, the thing that I push back on is Gonzaga has a number one seed locked up. Like unless I guess they could lose they have one more regular season game, and then they'd have to lose early in their tournament. And even then, their resume is so good that it probably shouldn't matter. And then you have to have at least one SEC and one Big 12 team as number one seeds, if not multiple of them, in addition to the good teams that are coming out of the Big 10 and the good teams, Arizona specifically, coming out of the Pac-12. So it feels like to me that you'd have to have a super bizarre set of losses to happen for Duke to be considered all the way in that top four.
I don't think so. I agree with you. I think Gonzaga is number one. I think Arizona is very, very close to having it locked up. Maybe if they go into a swoon, if they lose two more games, but I think Arizona probably has room to even lose one more game and still be a number one seed. The question really is, it's like Kentucky and Auburn, and Baylor and Kansas. And I think one of Baylor or Kansas will probably be a number one, but I'm not convinced that Kentucky and Auburn, that one of those teams automatically gets to the number one seed line for that last number one seed, because first of all, Tennessee could win the SEC. That wouldn't be a crazy thing that happened. There are good teams in the SEC. LSU is a really good team. They could knock someone off. And I think, especially if it's Kentucky, if Duke and Kentucky are right next to each other, I think Duke may get the bump because we have the regular season win over them. And Auburn actually isn't as good, even though Auburn's record looks great. Their advanced metrics they're not as strong as you would think. Like, Auburn's won a lot of close games. In fact, Auburn's been losing a lot of games they probably should have lost, but they found a way to win at the last minute or two. So there's still a path, I think, for Duke.
I think when I mean controlling our own destiny I think we still do. It's not necessarily the end goal being a number one seed. I think, honestly, if you're Coach K and the coaching staff and the players, they want to stay close to home. And I think the destiny that they have is Greenville, Philadelphia, which is the East region. And if they're the number one seed in the ACC tournament and they win the ACC tournament, chances are they're either getting a number one seed, which is great, or they're going to be one of the strongest two seeds, and they'll be placed in the East, which is exactly where they want to be, because they want to do Greenville, Philadelphia, then New Orleans. So I think those sort of pathways are still there, but it all starts with one thing: win the ACC. It starts with that. If they don't win the ACC, we don't have to worry about this discussion, because they will have their hands at the mercy of the media, of the committee. But I do think also it's similar to football, right? Where you had Cincinnati, who was winning all their games, and everybody's like, I don't know, their conference is kind of weak, but they were a strong team. The only difference between that is that Duke is in a Power 5 conference. So Duke can then say, hey, look, it does not matter what you think of the ACC. It is a Power 5 conference. It has some of the best teams and players in the country, and we just destroyed everybody, and we beat everybody in the ACC, and we won the ACC tournament. Their resume will be on parallel with everyone else in the country.
The one thing I want people to watch when it comes to, you're right, Donald, Duke's preferred path is Greenville and then Philadelphia. The one thing I want people to watch is Villanova, because if Duke gets Philadelphia, we don't want Villanova to be a 3 seed. We don't want Villanova to be the 3 seed in that bracket. Villanova sort of gamed their schedule this year. They intentionally played less games in the Wells Fargo Center than they ordinarily would, so that they could still go there for the NCAA tournament. There are a lot of people talking about this and saying that this is wrong. Ordinarily, the Wells Fargo Center, where the Philadelphia Regional is being played, is Villanova's home floor. And there are a lot of people who are saying it would be really unfair to the NCAA to put Villanova. How unfair would it be to a 2 seed and to a 1 seed for them to essentially be playing road games against Villanova, who's lower seeded than they are? It's one thing if Villanova was a 1 seed, you go, okay, well, they kind of earned that. But it's a whole different story. If you're the number 2, like Duke, and Villanova falls to the 3 line, they might be a 2, by the way. Villanova might be a 2. But if you're in Philadelphia and Villanova is a lower seed than you, it would not be fair for the NCAA tournament to put Villanova in that bracket. And I hope that they don't. But that's one thing to watch out for, because there's a very real possibility of that.
And they've done that before. Villanova has, because this was a couple years ago when they were winning NCAA championships. They did the same thing because Philly was, I don't think it was a regional, but I think it was like the first round. And they knew that they wanted to play there and kind of stay at home. But it's a very significant advantage. But I will say this, I feel comfortable about that because apparently we're the road beaters. We kill everybody on the road so far this season. So I feel confident in the NCAA tournament having to play a road game. I just would prefer not to.
And Duke almost always plays its first round games in the NCAA tournament wherever all the Carolina fans are anyway. So nothing new about that. And I'll say, by the way, I know I mentioned this last time. If Duke doesn't get Philadelphia, like Duke is almost certainly getting Greenville for that first weekend.
Oh yeah,
because there's nobody else. That's
basically
locked, right? Among those top 1, 2, 3 seeds. Even if Duke doesn't get Philadelphia, if they get Chicago or even San Francisco, those are, there are tons of Duke fans and Duke alumni in those places. Even San Antonio, I think, has a decent population for it. A Duke trip to Chicago. I was in Chicago a few years ago when Duke was there for Champions Classic. I can tell you, even though that event was against Kentucky and Michigan State, and Kansas, who are all closer to Chicago and have big fan bases there, no shortage of Duke fans in the arena at the United Center.
Coach K going home. That'd be Coach K going home.
Yeah, I'm about to say that storyline. That storyline is there too. So I would not be beyond them to say that.
So I'm, as far as this year goes, I'm not Philadelphia. Honestly, now that you've talked about this Villanova angle, Philadelphia might be the worst place to go because Duke's going to have fans anywhere they go this season. And, maybe in San Antonio, you run into one of those Texas teams, but in San Francisco, it's not like Gonzaga is so close to San Francisco that everybody from Spokane is picking up and going to that game. Same thing for Arizona. So I'm not worried about where Duke gets shipped this season. I think that the way that things have fallen in the ACC and where the NCAA tournament sites are is not so bad. This is not Duke having to go to Omaha and playing Kansas in Omaha, which is the way it was a few years ago and is a much different scenario. This year they're playing in big cities where Duke's going to have a big presence. So we'll kind of see how that plays out. All right, guys, we need to do our player of the week picks because it is the weekend. Duke had 2 games this week. Of course, the close win against Virginia and in Charlottesville, and then also that big win on the road against Syracuse. So let's do player of the week picks. Jason, I think, gave a little bit of a preview about guys he was thinking about, at least. Jason, who are you taking for player of the week?
Yeah, so I wanted to shout out Jeremy Roach, who was amazing against Virginia and had a nice game against Syracuse, but it wasn't enough for me. Mark Williams is my pick for player of the week. Absolutely dominant, just dominant in both those games. Ridiculous statistics. And as I said earlier, seems to be playing better and better and better as the season moves on. Eye-popping results. Just his stats are crazy. And he's my pick as player of the week.
Donald, who you got?
This was a difficult one for me because I considered Jeremy Roach and I considered Mark Williams, but ultimately I'm going with AJ Griffin for his shooting in both games. He hit 9 threes this week, is probably the best shooter in the ACC, one of the best shooters in the country from beyond the arc, and really is just every single one as a backbreaker to whoever team he's facing. So I love to see the kid play. I've loved, watching him develop into this dynamic shooter. He's my guy.
Hey, if you took the final 5 minutes against Virginia and the first 5 minutes against Syracuse, I think AJ Griffin had like 30 points.
Right.
And I was looking this morning, AJ Griffin is now up to hitting 50% of his threes in ACC play. And so he got a little bit of a slow start.
Is that a good number?
He got a bit of a slow start, obviously, because of the injury. And then he was working his way back into the rotation. But since conference play started, he's hitting 50% of his 3-point attempts. That is stupid. And on the season, he's just under 50. I think he's at 48 or 49.
48%.
He's at a clean 50% in conference play. So, you don't want to leave AJ Griffin open. All right. So
AJ Griffin he's won 3-pointer away from being 50%. He's at 56 out of 114. If he was 57 out of 114, he would be at exactly 50%.
So keep tracking that as we near the end of the season. So Jason took Mark Williams. Donald took AJ Griffin. Jason talked about Jeremy Roach. I have not gotten a chance to take Jeremy Roach, I don't think, in a Player of the Week award this season. So why not? I'm going to give it to Jeremy Roach for all the reasons that Jason stated. It's great to have him playing well. We have bemoaned Jeremy Roach, I know, the last few weeks. So to have him rounding into form here, being a bit of a defensive pest off the bench, being a little bit of a scorer, taking a backseat distributor role for this team could be huge for them come tournament time, because any of these guys can get in foul trouble, or any of these guys can have off shooting nights or just not be in it. And Jeremy Roach has an opportunity to be a key part of this team in multiple games in the NCAA tournament. You guys also mentioned on the last episode, I told you that I listened. You mentioned on the last episode that Jeremy Roach led the team in scoring, which was now the 6th player this season to lead Duke in scoring. You know who guessed that 6 different guys would lead Duke in scoring this season in the stats game? This guy. So I have won that category. The two of you guessed 5. I said 6, and I have been staring at that one all year because I figured that time was running out for Roach or for Joey Baker. So here we are. I have won that category.
So Jeremy Roach bribed the Player of the Week thing. You took him because he helped you win a stat game.
There's no ethic behind our selections here. Donald already won the walk-ons points total. We already beat that topic to death on a recent episode. And the 3-point shooting, Donald is also going to run away with that one because he's the one that picked AJ Griffin. I'm going to say out of nowhere because I can't believe that you knew that one was coming. So
I almost laughed at him when he took AJ Griffin. I was like, really? I was like,
what do you mean?
A good shooter?
Admittedly, I'm not. I'm not
no
watching,
idea that he'd be this good.
I'm not watching all the high school mixtapes. I just saw the shape of AJ Griffin, and I was like, I mean, he seems like he's going to be awesome. I just don't know that he's going to be the best shooter. Like, look at the shape of his shoulders. How could he possibly shoot like that?
Hey, 60% of the time, I'm right every time.
Exactly. I think it's probably about what you're shooting from the field. Okay, guys, we need to get out of here. Duke plays Pittsburgh, as we said, on Tuesday. That is going to be their first game in March. It is March. It is officially tournament season here in college basketball and on the Duke Basketball Report podcast. But until then, for Jason Evans, for Donald Wine, I am Sam Klein. This has been episode 395 of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. Stay in touch with us, dbrpodcast@gmail.com. We love the headlines. We love the reviews. We love that you're trying to see us at games. We love all of it. We will talk to you again soon. Duke Band, take us home.
Fine job, gentlemen.
Sweet.
And we recorded it.
Yes.
Twice.
Let me give you a big Labor Day surprise. Most people think if we all exercise the same and eat the same, we'd all look the same. And let me tell you why that's wrong. Your body is unique and your metabolism is unique. I'm Lacey Green and I'm a super trainer at Body. That's BODI.com. And you can't see me, but I don't look like your average personal trainer. I'm curvy and I'm proud of it. So I created a program for beginners only on the Body app to show people like us how to get incredible results and be our version of happy and healthy. This isn't just workout videos. It's people like you and me. It's community. It's incredible trainers. It's easy to follow nutrition and mindset experts to help you reduce stress and just feel better. And you can get started with my new program called For Beginners Only. Now, here's the big surprise. If you go to body.com right now, that's BODI.com, not only can you get everything Body has to offer at 50% off with an annual membership, you'll also get an additional 20% off, but only during Labor Day weekend. Let's do this together. Go to body.com. That's body with an I.com.